Hi. How was lunch? Everyone like lunch? Okay, now you guys know that when you come to the Canadian Club for lunch, nothing that is sugary sweet has any calories in it, so feel free to enjoy yourselves. I swear. Again, in case you missed it, my name is Melanie Griffith, Director of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and your host. I'm so glad, welcome to those of us who are joining online. As a fiercely Canadian club, we work hard to bring you topics and speakers that address the issues that affect us as a nation. Whether it's politics, business, arts, or culture, engaging in discourse about top-of-mind topics never gets old. And the proof is in your attendance today. We're so glad you're here. Let me take a moment to welcome our youth and young leaders who are in attendance today from Ryerson's Radio and Television Arts Program. Where are you, fantastic students? Hi! I had the opportunity to meet some of them at a small pre-reception. They are so fantastic and full of energy, so please make it an effort to go and say hello if you have a chance, or trust me, they will come find you. Now it's time to introduce our guest speaker. News and cultural offerings are many and easily accessible, no matter where you may be. You can sample these on a number of digital platforms 24/7, 365. How does this access impact our ability to maintain and enhance our Canadian identity and culture? CBC Radio Canada is an essential player in Canada's news and content landscape. In a borderless world filled with a plethora of digital content choices, the challenge is how to preserve and promote Canadian news, voices, and stories. The President and CEO of CBC Radio Canada has plenty of ideas on how to do this. Catherine Tait has headed Canada's National Broadcasting Corporation since 2018. She's launched a new strategic plan for the corporation, Your Stories Taken to Heart. Its main priority is to reinvigorate our interest in and loyalty to public broadcasting and to ensure that our country and Canadian creators are seen and heard. Last year, Catherine took the lead of a new global task force on public media. The task force is building recognition for the unique value of public broadcasting. Previously, she was a producer and entrepreneur with companies such as Duopoly Inc., Authentic, and Hollywood Suite, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting her. She also has served in senior roles at Salter Street Films, the Canadian Cultural Centre in Paris, and Telefilm Canada. Please joining Catherine in conversation is Arlene Dickinson. She's the general partner of District Ventures Capital, a venture capital fund that supports entrepreneurial companies in the food and health space. She is a two-time best-selling author, accomplished public speaker, and is best known for her role as Dragon venture capitalist for over 10 seasons on the multi-award-winning television series Dragon's Den. Catherine, Arlene, I am pleased to turn the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium over to the two of you.
Okay. Are you plugged in?
I am.
Oh, okay.
All right. This is going to be an interesting conversation. Catherine, when the Canadian Club asked me to come and speak and moderate this session, I thought a lot about what my feelings are about CPC. And in particular, I want to start with saying, just like on the show, there's ideas that I love. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to ask easy questions just because I love the idea. So I had a conversation with Catherine ahead of time and told her that I was going to ask her some tougher questions. And she said, you can ask me absolutely anything, so I'm going to hold you to that, Catherine.
Okay.
And thank you for that. I am a child of I was an immigrant to Canada, came here many, many years ago into this country, and CBC actually raised me. And so I have a lot of, as I said, a lot of heart for the things I learned at the foot of, listening to the radio while we were in the living room at the time and listening to Canadians from all across the country share their stories, growing into watching the shows on television, growing into then being on television, and now into the digital age. And so, as I said, I love the product, but I do have some questions about kind of what's going on that I know that you're going to be able to help answer. So we're both entrepreneurs, which I think is really great. We have something in common. I was never attached to France in any way, but I'd like to be. But we've had careers in private business, and I'd like to start with how your experience as an independent producer has influenced your role as president of a large cultural corporation like the public broadcaster that you now find yourself in the role of.
Can I say something before I answer the question?
Yes.
I want to acknowledge the kind presence of so many people from the industry and our partners. This is always an amazing thing when people show up. So it means you care about public broadcasting, and so I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. You are the ambassadors, hopefully, for the CBC Radio-Canada. This is a big year for us. So thank you. All right, back to that. Entrepreneurs.
Okay, back to that. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we, as all of us in the room here, I mean, we've basically got pretty well many of our cultural leaders here. Valerie Creighton from the Canada Media Fund, Arlene Dickinson from Telefilm, Barb Williams, who actually runs the CBC, I mean, and some of our finest journalists. We all own this asset. I kind of think of it as our most precious asset as a business person. So when I approach the CBC Radio-Canada as an independent producer, I think about two things. How do we create the best possible product, whether it's news or cultural programming? And also, how do we run a business in a sensible way that will have a return to our investors? And in this case, our investors and our shareholders are the Canadian public. We don't pay dividends, cash dividends, but we pay other dividends. So I really do bring that business head to it, but maybe not in the way that a straight business entrepreneur from the private sector would be. One of the things I always say is we don't have just one bottom line at the CBC Radio-Canada. We have several. And it makes it for a very complicated, but also a very enriching endeavor. I feel like I have my back to E1. I'm going to talk to you like this. Can you see? We can hear you. Okay, good. All right.
So to that point, I mean, how do you think of CBC as a business? I mean, you came from the private sector where business does have very specific metrics that you care about on a daily basis, that you drive towards, but the metrics are different here. And I was doing some research, and I found out that for the last decade, your payroll has been flat. While inflation has gone at 1.52%, CBC has kept its payroll flat. There's a good example of how do you run an organization that has to grow and change and evolve and create new products and new cultural kind of methodologies to get people to understand what's going on in our culture, and yet still not have any more capital to do it with.
That was excellent question.
Is there anyone from the government here? No, kidding. That's of course everybody.
There's another. There's another a piece to the puzzle that you just described, which is we're living in the most profound period of disruption that the media industry has experienced. And those of us who have been in the industry for 30 or 40 years, we all lived through the coming of cable, the news, the coming of DVD, and everybody at every moment said, this is the end, or there will be the business is profoundly changed. But I would say that the coming of the internet has, in fact, entirely changed our business. So that means that for conventional broadcasters, top-line revenue is challenged. Advertising dollars have dropped in conventional advertising. And at the same time, subscription fees to our specialty channels have also dropped. So regardless of the inflation question, and really we do get adjusted for inflation on payroll, what we don't get adjusted for on inflation is cost and service and goods and services. What that means practically for Barb Williams, who opens the books at the beginning of the fiscal year, which happens to be April 1, which she has had to get used to, is we start the year with a deficit. What does that mean practically for a business person? That means you're constantly adjusting and trying to, on the one hand, find new sources of revenue, which is why those of you on the advertising side of the business in the room understand why it is we're always looking for opportunities to work with our commercial partners to find new revenues, not to pay cash dividends to people or to ourselves, but to reinvest in the great programming. So on the one hand, we're trying to find new revenue, and on the other hand, we're dealing with constantly redesigning, readjusting our workforce to be to match that deficit that we start the year with. So it's very challenging. I have to say, I think it was quoted, "This is my dream job." I think the dream is a little bit different. I think it is certainly the most challenging role that I have certainly ever had the privilege to take on. And all of us in the management team at CBC Radio-Canada share in the commitment to that, let's call it the double bottom line. On the one hand, running a smart business efficiently, and on the other hand, delivering on our mandate and our promise to Canadians.
So, I'm sure you've heard it, because there are a lot of people who, if you only have to be on Twitter 2 minutes to see the criticism and the people that are against CBC. And the number one criticism that I hear is that why should the government, and why should our government, with our taxpayer dollars, continue to spend more than $1 billion on public broadcasting when there are so many other choices out there? And so how do you, that's the constant criticism. So how do you make the case for CBC? How do you defend that?
So in a world of polarization, of really fractured, dangerous, bad actors, disinformation, and fake news, in a world where people, young people, I know from my children, feel very afraid of what is going on, and their opportunities, whether it's the climate change or the impact of politics, and feeling very much out of control. I see the public broadcaster as a kind of a lighthouse. We're not the only one. There are lots of great democratic institutions in this country, but we are a very important player in what links Canadians together in terms of social cohesion, in terms of nationhood. There really is no other national institution that serves all Canadians coast to coast to coast. In English, in French, in 8 Indigenous languages, we are there in a way that, as you described, tuning in, hearing from Canadians in Winnipeg or in Thunder Bay or in Moncton. We are there making that connection. And so the case for public broadcasting in this world, which is a scary world, I'm going to quote Madeleine Albright, it's genuinely, seriously bad what's going on. There are forces in the world, and I don't want to sound the alarm bell here, but we are, in a sense, the values and of Canada. It's the thing that makes me proud of being Canadian. The values of tolerance. When I'm looking at Yvonne Fitzanne here, a show like Kim's Convenience that shows our embrace of immigrants in this country. There are so many examples. Schitt's Creek. We are the hit in the world, but it's very particularly with the LGBTQ community, because we have that tolerance and that capacity for openness. So the case is, never before, in my opinion, has public broadcasting been so important or vital as it is right now today.
Yeah, you make a really good point that, I think our collective trust and the culture of Canada has never been in a place where it's needed a voice more importantly than it does today.
Well, we know Canadians name us. So over 70% of Canadians say that they consider the CBC Radio-Canada their most trusted source of news. So when you talk about, there's news everywhere and I can get it on Facebook and I get it on Google and all sorts of places. Sure, we're living actually in an overabundance of news and content and information. And so what becomes the safe place? There was a great article in the Toronto Star this week about libraries and the importance that libraries play in a safe public space. And I think of public broadcasting in the same way. Hopefully, at our best, we provide that safe place to gather, to exchange civil and civic debate, but also celebrate. I think about the Olympics, for example, coming up in Tokyo. This will be our opportunity as a country, not just in that one event, but all through the year. By the time the Olympics hit in August in Tokyo, and the Paralympics too, all Canadians will know the athletes that have been training, thanks to RBC and others, that have been training all year long. And that's the role. We connect those people, and hopefully we build a sense of nationhood.
So when you think about everything that's going on and what you describe in terms of the environment, what do you want your legacy to be? You know, like you talk about the fact, right? Like
survive.
That's right. That's a good legacy. I think that might be that.
You know, people ask me that all the time.
Don't trend on Twitter.
I know. They used to ask me, what's it like being the first woman? They've got over that question.
Yeah,
now they're asking me about my legacy. I'm only there a year and a half. It's actually interesting. I again, with Barb and Michel Bissonnette at Radio-Canada, we talk a lot about what we think, what makes us different from a private broadcaster. It's an enormous gift that the Canadian people give us, and we're enormously grateful for that gift. But in what way are we different, and how do we distinguish ourselves from private broadcasters and other private media? And I believe that it's how we serve Canadians, and we're the only only broadcaster that has in our mandate the obligation to serve all Canadians. That seems like a throwaway statement, but in fact, if you reflect upon it, what does that mean? It means if you're in Iqaluit, if you're a new Canadian from Syria, if you're a French Canadian living in Moncton, whoever you are, we have an obligation, young, old, rural, urban, we have an obligation to serve you. And so the legacy for me in that, and it was reflected, I hope, in our strategic plan, was to say, if we're to remain relevant, we must reflect the Canadian reality. We're accepting 350,000 immigrants each and every year. What does that mean for a country of 37 million people? It's an enormous number of people, and it's changing the face of the country. So if we're to remain relevant, we must reflect that reality. So when I go back to your legacy question, it's that we will figure out how do we, one, in our workforce, improve in terms of reflecting underrepresented Canadians in our workforce across all bands, not just the entry-level people, but right up the management ranks. And then, and then also in our programming. So a show like Kim's Convenience is a great example of how we are going to, it's a filter that we apply to everything we do in terms of our programming decisions. So if I can move the dial, so it links back to that, how does it feel to be the first woman to run the CBC Radio-Canada? So
I would never ask you that
I know
question.
You wouldn't. You've been a first woman. What I say now, as I've kind of had time to reflect upon it, I say, hopefully I'm not the last. But then I say, I put my foot in the door so that others can come in with me. And so that, I hope, will be my legacy, a true moving of the needle in terms of reflecting the reality of Canada.
I mean, it's a really interesting conversation, because I think a lot about what you said 70% of Canadians are very passionate about the product and the service that CBC offers in terms of helping them understand the culture and helping make sure that our voice is heard in the world. But there's 30% that aren't, and they are really negative, and they're really, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of people who really aren't understanding. So is part of the need for CBC to do a better job of promoting itself in a different way? It's not just about promoting the shows, it's about really talking about the value. And is that out there enough, do you think?
Well, one of the things that we did with the new strategic plan, and hopefully it's resonating among Canadians, was when we called it Your Stories Taken to Heart. Mm-hmm. And as a producer, the heart is extremely important in connecting with audience. And we had been through a process of transforming the business, and it was very internal looking about digital and how do we move to digital. And so when I came into the company, I said, how do we get Canadians to feel connected to us in a heart way? And that meant going back into the regions, prioritizing local, which is we have been doing, and connecting with children, making young people, because by the way, the 30% that don't say we're the most trusted group, they're not necessarily all against CBC, Radio-Canada. They may just have checked out. And I was talking to those Ryerson students. I said, how many of you are watching? You were there, Yvonne. How many of you are watching CBC every day? One hand went up. This is a problem. We must connect. To be relevant, if we do not connect with young people, and by the way, sorry to break it to you, people aren't watching television the way they used to, and young people aren't watching it at all. So to be relevant, to have an impact, we have to serve those young people where they are, which is online, on their phones, through GEM, through all sorts of digital means. A service that we launched last year and just launched on the French side is a kids news service. Mm-hmm. So we go across the country and we say to young people, you want to be a journalist? Come and work for Kids News. And our journalists are training those young people. Hopefully they'll be the next generation of great CBC, Radio-Canada journalists, and start involving them in what does it mean to be a journalist? What does it mean to tell the truth and to validate your story? But also, what is media literacy and what is false news, and all of the power that goes around that. I'm talking too much. I'll stop.
No.
I was losing her. I could see.
No.
The dragon.
The show's been renewed, right? No, I was wandering down a field naked. I don't know what I was doing. I was actually thinking a lot about what you were saying about how the CBC was conceived at a time when broadcast media in Canada was limited, right? Mm-hmm. And people from across the country were connected as a result in very limited ways. So when you think about the birth of CBC, what was going on in the world, mm-hmm. that was the situation. Today, as you just said, connection is as easy as looking at a phone. I mean, you can get on a phone, you can be connected to anyone, anywhere, you can get information from anyone, anywhere, and that even that is changing rapidly, where technology is kind of surpassing even the user experience right now. Mm-hmm. So what is the role, I guess, that CBC can play that's unique in that evolving environment that's different than what any other broadcaster can do, or anybody with a phone can do nowadays? I mean, anybody can publish, everybody says they're journalists, everybody says that they can spread misinformation immediately. So what is it that you can do, CBC?
Well, there are two pieces to that question. One is, as all of you know, we have a thing called the Journalistic Standards and Practices, a code that our journalists, and I have to honor them because they are literally, they are the beating heart of what we do. The people that work and report on the news and do the investigative journalism, all of those, that extraordinary, precious trust is based on transparent rules around what is good journalism. So that's point number one. And we have ombudsmen there in case somebody disagrees with what we thought was good journalism. And so there's a process around that Canadians know, it's been checked. And if there was a mistake made, and we make mistakes, we have a process for dealing with it so that we're not hiding anything. It's out in the open. The most powerful thing, I believe, on how the public broadcaster distinguishes itself, and I think we've seen this in Britain in the most recent decisions made at the BBC, is the proximity to local and to the regions. When you're in a world of global digital giants that are monetizing a world audience, their focus is on that. How do I maximize my return on a global audience? We're looking at maximizing a mandate return, which is, again, connection, support, civil discourse at the local level. So our proximity to Canadians is, in my opinion, the single most precious thing that we have, and it's why we're focused on it. It's why we're in the region saying, what more can we do? How do we bring, rather, not just the news, but the news of life to audiences? Because at the end of the day, that discovering that your neighbor who just arrived from Egypt, or discovering the suffering of your Iranian Canadian neighbor. I mean, I was in Winnipeg, and it's at those moments when Canadians tell us, you are the most important thing for us because you connect us, and thank you for the work you do. So a big shout out for our journalists, some of whom are in the room, do great work.
What I was thinking about when you were telling, giving that answer, I was thinking about, I hope I don't get his name wrong, Tarek Haddad from Nova Scotia, who, a Syrian refugee who came to Canada and then created a Piece by Chocolate, a chocolate company. And so what I was thinking about, as you said that, I thought I probably wouldn't have heard about his story had it not been for CBC. It was amplified in a way that really started to really reach into me as a Canadian, and because it was told in a way that as I only could relate to as a Canadian. So
that's a really important point. To be fair to private broadcasters and to private news media companies, the pressures on the news business across the country are very, very significant. And we are very cognizant of those pressures, and we appreciate that we have a role to play to amplify stories, but also to collaborate with our other media partners in a better way. And we have right now in Winnipeg a pilot project with the Winnipeg Free Press. We're actually sharing resources to cover off on the weekend. And Winnipeg Free Press stories appear on CBC's platform. And it's a way, talk about amplifying, it's a way that we can say, here's another great journalistic organization. We do not want to be the last man standing in this business. Multiplicity of opinions, diversity of positions, political, that's key to a healthy democracy. So just to be clear, I would love that story be covered by somebody else as well.
Yes, and I'm sure others did cover it. I think my point was more just the way it was told was very, very relevant to me in terms of the CBC coverage that I saw. But around the world, you touch on another point. Around the world, many governments, not all governments, but many governments are either hostile to public broadcasting or are trimming its funding, or tightening its mandate, making its mandate less broad and tightening it up. So last year you agreed to chair a global task force on public broadcasting. Is public broadcasting in trouble, Catherine?
Well, I would say social democracy is in trouble in a sense, and we as a player in that equation, we are also not under siege, but certainly experiencing pressures, and we've seen it I mentioned the BBC, but also this year in Australia, where police went into the Australian Broadcast Corporation and seized computers, and so we are very, and was one of the reasons that I agreed to chair this task force. It's really important that this is again, I call it a precious asset, but really it's a spectacularly precious asset. And we cannot underestimate it. Somebody said, oh, you only care about public broadcasting when they take it away from you. You only care when it's about national health, when it's no longer available. I do believe that these things come and go. We're in a certain global economic reality where there is an increasing number of what we used to be public broadcasters who have become under the direct command of nations, of political parties. So there is an issue about independence. It's why in this process of the review of the Broadcasting Act, we have been so clear about the single most important thing is to protect the independence of the public broadcaster from any influence from government. And why when we talk about stable funding for the CBC Radio-Canada, it's really about, we want to do the best we can for Canadians, and we don't want to be always reacting to whatever the government of the day has as its priorities. So yes, I would say public broadcasting is in transition, but we're not the only ones. Let's be clear. The entire industry is. I mean, I often say, the reality of the public broadcaster today is we have the same budget, more or less, but we now have two businesses. We're operating a linear television, terrestrial radio business, and about 25% of Canadians only consume those traditional businesses. And that 25% is a declining number. It's largely an older audience. It could be a northern audience where there is no access to broadband. It could be a rural audience. 25% of our audience only consumes digital. Yeah. And that's the fastest growing audience, and that's younger Canadians, new Canadians. They arrive with a mobile phone, They never buy a TV set.
Yeah.
And that fast-growing urban audience has no interest in consuming in the way. So it doesn't mean they don't like the shows, they just don't consume them in that way. And then we have smack in the middle, 49%, people like you and me, might listen to a younger group. Listen to the radio in the car, but then watch Gem in the evening, might catch up on a podcast, as I do all the time when I'm traveling. So we're consuming and kind of moving seamlessly between the two. So and we're not alone. France Télévisions has that challenge, BBC has that challenge. I think to myself, Facebook, Google, Netflix, they have pure play businesses, and you would understand that. Mm-hmm. It's easier to run a pure play business than a business, what I call a hybrid media business, which is what we're doing. And we're juggling so many different obligations. And don't forget, go back to the mandate. Our mandate is to serve all of those people. We can't abandon my mother.
Yeah. All right, so under the guise of I can ask you anything, these are questions from the audience. So when determining priorities for CBC, where does news rank? Looking out to
I
see
was going to say, who said that? You know, there are so many, I have to be careful, there's so many Solomon's choices in programming and in everything we do. But I think I did say earlier, the beating heart of the CBC is its news organization. It is the boots on the ground that I think informs what we do. It's the difference between a public broadcaster like CBC Radio-Canada and a PBS. You know, we are fundamentally, at our core, a news organization. However, our mandate is to inform, enlighten, and entertain Canadians. So let's not forget about that entertain piece, because at the end of the day, that also is probably the biggest connector. It's where we tell each other our stories, and we are probably the most important driver for the creative industry in the country.
Great. Maybe you've touched on this, but how can you compete financially with digital giants?
Well, we can't. The answer is we cannot. So at last count, I asked one of my colleagues this morning, how much exactly Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Apple Plus, Disney Plus, and the number exceeds $50 billion next year that will be going into content. Last year, 538 scripted series were produced in North America or in English language. We cannot compete on a dollar for dollar. That's just off the table. But what we can do is stick to authentic stories. So I often say internally, authenticity sells. It sounds like authenticity sells. That sounds kind of weird. But think about it. Think about the shows that actually have done well on a global scale. Schitt's Creek, Kim's Convenience. These are authentic, true stories to who we are as Canadians, whether it's part of our comedy background or part of a cultural reality. And I think right now I'm terrifically excited about a French-Canadian series called C'est comme ça que je t'aime. In English, they're calling it Happily Married. I'm not sure why, but anyway, I would have thought it's How I Love You. But anyway, it's an amazing series from the producers of Casablanca, the company of Casablanca in Quebec. A story of 1970s, two couples in a suburb outside of Quebec City who decide to take on a life of crime. Unbelievably French-Canadian. The language is totally true to the place and true to the time. And it just got accepted in a very, very really important section of the Berlin Film Festival. They only take 8 drama series from around the world, and C'est comme ça que je t'aime was invited to be at that event. So when you talk about legacy, a hit French-Canadian series would be one of them, and a hit Indigenous series would be another. Really, it's that authenticity. Audiences are craving for it, and we punch above our weight in that area, I think.
I don't know that a title, Happily Married, is going to do that well.
I set you up on that one.
I've heard rumor that there's such a thing, but you also did touch on this, but I think expanding on it would be awesome, especially with the Ryerson students that are here. My daughter took that went and graduated from Ryerson in film and video, and she loved the program. So I hope you guys continue to do very, very well, because you are the future of what's going to happen in this industry. How is CBC Radio Canada remaining relevant to younger audiences? I think that came from them.
I must have come from them. I think we've made it a priority in our strategic plan, which, as you know, Canada, for all its peculiarities, you were there, we decided in the process of not handing out, but competing for specialty channels, that the private broadcasters took the role of having those dedicated kids channels. Whereas in most other countries where there's a public broadcaster, the public broadcaster would have a BBC Kids or an ABC Kids, a dedicated channel for kids. For whatever reason, it's the kind of our mixed private-public approach in the media business here. We did not do that. So CBC Radio-Canada has always played a rather minor role, very strong in preschool, but really not really playing in that 6 years old to 30. Oh, and then we expect them at 30 to come back when they've got a mortgage and a car to tune in and to feel loyal. Doesn't work that way. So when we talked about, in French, the strategy is called Entre nous, c'est pour la vie, which actually speaks to the lifelong engagement that we want to hopefully earn and engender among young people. And so what are we doing for kids? We're buying programming for GEM that speaks to them, hopefully hitting a broader range of age groups. We're producing, as I mentioned, kids news. We're on Snapchat. We're running a news service on Snapchat. We're on YouTube. And most importantly, where we're seeing the biggest connection is actually in podcasts. Barb, help me. Tait says that. What is it? Tait Asks Why. Yes. Tait Asks Why is a kids' podcast where a terrifically intelligent young girl asks important questions. So it's really about, we focus on where is the audience, and it's where are the kids, what are they consuming, and what can we deliver to them there. We can't say, come and tune in at 6 p.m. or after school to your CBC network. It's just not going to happen.
Okay. So we're almost out of time, but I would like to ask you if there's anything you could say to Canadians. Apparently this is being taped, so in the digital age, people will go back and find out that I wasn't running naked through a field in my mind, hopefully. But
I don't think I can get that out of my
No,
head.
I'm sorry, all of you. Usually it's me thinking about the audience naked. No, don't. But just...
Where is this going?
I know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure myself. But if you wanted to leave a comment to Canadians about why they should tune in, whether it's digitally, whether it's through the radio, whether it's news, whether it's TV, whatever the sports offering, whatever it is that you're serving up, what is the message that you would like to leave to Canadians?
I think that the message I would leave is that we're here to serve. And we're taking your direction. We're paying attention, we're listening, we know what you're tuned into. When I go across the country, which I do a lot, and I meet Canadians, and we talk to stakeholders and influencers in communities, and we ask them, what could we be doing better? I mean, I go back to every Canadian is a shareholder in this grand endeavor undertaking, which is the public broadcasters. So as I always say, every time I meet a Canadian, they basically have two jobs. One, their real job. Two, to tell me how I should be doing my job and what it is the CBC could be doing better. Just keep communicating with us. Don't abandon us. We are here to serve. I assure you that the people that are working each and every day at CBC Radio-Canada are very, very cognizant of the privilege of being the public broadcaster, but also the enormous responsibility that carries.
Catherine, it's been a real pleasure to chat with you. I've learned a lot about the CBC, and as I said, very much love the CBC. And thank you for sharing so much of your thoughts and your vision for the future of what this the broadcaster is going to do and what this means to our country. So really appreciated it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Catherine, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I'd like to thank you for sharing your passion about Canada, its rich and unique news and cultural brand with us this afternoon. CBC Radio Canada has been part of the fabric of Canadian news and broadcasting content for as long as we can remember. And your impassioned argument for staking our ground and even strengthening our news and cultural identity resonated, I think, with all of us. Wouldn't you say? Yeah? We appreciate the leadership that you are bringing and the amazing legacy you most undoubtedly will that will continue. You're bringing the role of public broadcasting in society. CBC Radio Canada is a fine example, and we wish you continued success in your role. Arlene, we are delighted that you were able to lead us in such a powerful and exciting discussion. We appreciate your support and your many talents, which are on full display today. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.